Alrighty, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Professor Sohail here with another Sikh history lecture. Um, so in today's video, we are going to be covering the time period after the Sepoy Rebellion. So we're going to get started on those. Um, so yeah, um, pretty much before the Sepoy Rebellion and after annexation, the border administration was formed, and immediately what they started doing is developing their colony. Because remember, Punjab and the rest of India is a British colony now, so they're going to use it to, like get resources and money and all that stuff. So as soon as they took over in Punjab, they started to make it into a colony, with all the canals, the trees and the agriculture, the industry, and all those things that we talked about in the past, that the border administration did right after annexation. That's going to continue now because the Sepoy Rebellion kind of put everything on a halt, and it required the British to make some changes so they can continue to govern their colony. So since we're done with the rebellion, we're going to talk about a lot of the changes that happened throughout. Um, Mostly in the beginning here, there's a lot of economic changes, a little bit of political, and then we're also going to get into more of the social and religious changes that happened. Because if you really ask anybody, Sikh history in like the late 1800s, like 1850 to like 1900, or like from Anglo-Sikh wars to World War One, it's characterized by the religious, reform movements that happened because Sikhism started to like die out a bit. So it's characterized by um, a lot of those religious reform movements that happened. So that's pretty much the highlight of the late 1800s. But of course, there's a lot of other things going on. So we're going to get into those things as well. Um, so pretty much after the mutiny, the government's going to resume the development of the colony, especially in Punjab, because that's their newest territory there. Um, and by far, the most significant change that they made right after the rebellion is the building of canals and the developing of farmland, and also the addition of railroads. Remember, the British started to build a lot of the infrastructure, like railroads, schools, buildings, farms, all that stuff. And canals were probably the biggest thing that they made in India. Like there was a ridiculous amount of canals um, that brought water to so many different lands out there. It's really the reason that Punjabi farming is even a thing, even today. Um, and just some examples. You don't have to know all of these. I just included a little bit of it. Um, the Hasli Canal, it was extended. You know, the Upper Bari Doab Canal was completed in 1861. There was even more, like this book, the PDF reading book. It even talks about even. I didn't put all of them in there. It's not important to remember all the names, but there's like so many of them. Like the first page mentions a lot of them. Like so many new districts of Punjab, water was brought to all of them from these. Um, and even in the 1880s and 90s, the really deserty area of like Multan, which is kind of south of Punjab, it was irrigated by 1922, and the lower Chenab Canal, it irrigated by 1922 2.5 million acres of land, which is a lot. Like I looked it up, and like New Jersey is like 5.5 million acres. So this is a little bit less than half of New Jersey irrigated by a canal. It's a lot. And just so you know, irrigation, here it's the word irrigated. It just means like bringing water to a place that needs it. So like if you bring water to your farmland, that's irrigating it, which you need water to grow your crops. So that's what irrigation is. It's associated with farming. So, but it pretty much just means bringing water to a place that needs it, usually a farm. So, and the biggest irrigation scheme by the British was actually called the Triple Project. This is a little later on, like 1905 to 1919, but it's still important because their building of canals kept continuing, like all the way up until Indian independence. So, from this time, the early 1900s, they built these three huge canals, which again irrigated so much more land, which adds to the development of the colony. Um, and I don't know if I can really stress it enough, but they built so many canals that irrigated so much land, and it's important because most of that like area of India is just pretty much dry desert wasteland. Like this is useless land. There's nothing. You can't do anything there. So these canals brought water to these lands, which made them able to farm. So that turned the dry barren wasteland of the Indian land into prosperous farmland. And pretty much how this was done, just to illustrate it, like how these canals and everything worked. So like if this is like, for example, let's say this is your river, right? Make this like a river. So you can farm, as water here, so you can farm like along here, right? Like all the way through here. But what about like, all this land out here? That's like, like I'll put it yellow, like this is all like dry, like wasteland here. Can't do anything there. So the canals, what they do is they actually take, from this river, they take water from the river and they kind of extend it. So I'll make that a little bit smaller. So what they do is they kind of extend it. So you have a canal here, you got a canal there, and you even maybe make another branch here. Now look at all this dry wasteland that you can farm now here and here and here, there, and all the way across here. So that's how the canals work. You're able to take that, dry like wasteland here and just, make it into something useful, which is the importance of the canals here. So does that make sense, guys? Good. Alrighty. And of course, now these areas where it used to be dry and now it's like more you know, like watery from the canals and everything. A lot of times you refer to as the canal colonies. A lot of the areas that were developed as a result of the canals. And estimated like right away when they started building it, it's estimated by like 1 million Punjabi peasants. There mostly were Sikhs. They moved to the canal colonies to work the land there and stuff like that. So the thing is, these canal colonies, that's extremely important. And a lot of it's pretty much like the birth of Punjabi farming right here. And even after the rebellion, as soon as they like built these canals to make more farmland, the English colonization officers, so like the British officers in India, they scoured through, they went through all like the Sikh villages, mainly in Amritsar, Firozpur, Ludhiana, like these major cities in Punjab, to look for the best farmers. They're going to want to recruit from Sikh communities, because generally they're less educated than like the upper class Hindus and stuff, so they're better suited to for like the military and farming, things like that. And they also trust them more after the Sepoy rebellion. So they went through all these major cities in Punjab to look for the best farmers. So they recruited all the best farmers to work these new canal colonies. And what they would do, they would gather together these farmers from Punjab, and they would give them land to farm, which is, of course, is like a win-win situation. They get land, and they get a job and food from their land, and the British get benefits. They have resources, money, and stuff coming from that farmland. So what happens is when they go through Punjab to look for these farmers, they divide them up into 3 groups. The lowest group are like the really like poor peasants. They were given about like 14 to 16 like acres of land for free. They were just given that to farm on. And again, that's important because now the British have farmers for them, and these peasants have land and all things like that. The next people they would call the yeomans, it's kind of a weird term, but the thing is they were like in the middle, they're like the middle class farmers. They were given just over 100 acres of land, like 111 to 139-ish acres, but they had to purchase it. It was about like 6 to 9 rupees an acre, which was about the price of land at the time. About like 10 per acre was about the price, so they gave that to them for that price. And the highest group of these farmers were called the capitalists, and they were given a lot more land. There's a big range here, 167 to 556. So like a couple hundred acres for 10, 20 rupees an acre. So pretty much the farmers are divided up into these 3 groups, and given like a hierarchy. Okay, these farmers are better. We like this class of people more, so we're gonna give them more land. Peasants will give them a little less, but they can still farm, things like that. So of course, the Punjabi farmers are going to be very enthusiastic to take this land and go to work, because from the Anglo-Sikh wars, they had no job, nowhere to go. They're finally starting to get recruitment in the army, and they're getting land. So they have really no reason to be pissed off at all. And they have a good relationship with the British, kind of, after the Sepoy rebellion. So this is very exciting for them. And these first few years, after the Sepoy Rebellion, the farming was so successful that there was actually so much harvest that they couldn't even handle it all. Like a lot of it ended up rotting in the warehouses, because it was so successful so quickly that, the British didn't even have the means to use it all. So that just kind of tells you how successful it was right off the bat. Um, and by 1920, so again, this is going more into the future, but by 1920, Punjab alone, remember, Punjab is not that huge of a place, especially compared to India. It produced a tenth of the British's cotton supply, and even bigger, a third of its wheat. Like that's pretty huge. Like that little place in India is making a third of the British supply of wheat. Like, it's a lot, and it's important because wheat is a staple in, the diet of pretty much everybody around the world. Any culture, wheat is a big staple. So a third of the wheat coming from Punjab is huge. That's very significant. So, of course, that's good for the farmers and good for the British. Um, and of course, to support all this farming, all the crops and all these things that are coming, um, the British also have to speed up their building of the canals and railroads so they can transport all this stuff. So the building of canals and railroads is speeding up. By 1861, they even started to begin to build a railroad from Lahore to Amritsar, which is important because those are like the two biggest cities in Punjab, pretty much all of India, kind of. So it's important. A railroad connected the two cities. You can, it's very good guess to say that it's going to be used a lot. So, and one of the most important effects of the let's get the mouse. One of the most important effects of all this such successful farming was that like in the beginning, like from after annexation in the 1850s, around the Sepoy Rebellion, like around that time, the price of land was about 10 rupees an acre. But by now, in like the next like 20 years, it rose 40 times to 400 rupees an acre. So look at this. These like higher class farmers got it for that 10 rupees an acre, and now it rose to 400. Like that's crazy. And like, such a short period of time, it rose that much. Like the value of the land is so much more valuable. Like if you go back here, this yellow, like disgusting land is kind of worthless. But now you can farm on it and it's very successful. You bet that that's going to be very expensive. Any land that's, has really good use is going to be expensive. So that's why, the price of land increased so much because the farming was so successful. The land is very, very valuable. So that's why the price of land went up so much over there, which again is good for, farmers and the British again. So yeah. And also, since this farming is so successful, the British want to keep it going. You don't want to give it up. Like if something else takes farming's place, you don't want that to happen. So since it's doing so good, they want to keep it that way. So this is going a little further in time a little bit, but this is going to about 1900. But to really solidify and, really just like, root it down, really plant in the agriculture in Punjab, right? Get it, plant in. But anyway, to really, solidify the agriculture practice in Punjab, the British passed what's called the Punjab Alienation of Land Act. This was in 1900, so we're going a little further into the future, but it's still important. And this Punjab Alienation of Land Act of 1900, it prohibited land transfer from farmers to non-farmers. So it's like if you own a farmland, after this act, you're not allowed to sell that farm to anybody who's not a farmer. So if you want to sell your farmland, you can only sell it to another farmer. You can't sell it to anybody else. And the purpose for that is so you don't lose the farmland. Because let's say Prabha owns a farmland and I'm like a money lender or someone who wants to build a factory or, build a school or something. He cannot sell me that land because then that's going to be farmland that's going to be turned into something else. And the British don't want that. They want agriculture to keep on booming. So if Prabha wants to sell his farmland, he can only sell it to, let's say, if Shahan's not a farmer, he can only sell it to another farmer. And that's so no farmland gets lost anywhere. Does that make sense, guys? All right. So that's what the Punjab Alienation of Land Act of 1900 was, and that's why it was put in place. Another important thing is this act, it was successful in solidifying the agriculture. But one important side effect that also happened to it between that is it caused a lot of like resentment, a lot of like kind of like bad vibes between like the rich like Hindu moneylenders, which are like, you know, bankers or like business owners, um, and like this the peasantry or like the Sikh or Muslim, mostly Sikh farming peasantry. So like, you know, the rich money lenders and the Hindus and like the Sikh farmers would kind of, there'd be a little bit of resentment because now they're not allowed to really you know, sell each other things. So this is a side effect of it, which kind of, you know, goes back to the roots of even how modern relationships are between like Sikhs and Hindus. That's kind of how it is these days. Hindu moneylenders and Sikh farmers. That's kind of how it's going to be for the rest of history. Um, so that's, you know, it caused a little bit of resentment and kind of bad vibes between the two, but um, it did succeed in not losing any farmland. So this was kind of the you know, multi-face part of this act. Um, and yeah, even more important from here, um, is land, like specifically farmland. It was given to ex-soldiers. So anybody who served in the military under the British, after they were done with their service, they would be given land. Um, and this is nothing new. Like it's existed. This practice has existed in India for like hundreds of years, even back before Guru Nanak and stuff. But back then it was given only to like, you know, military officers and things like that. Now it's given more to like all the soldiers, and even that's still nothing new. That practice started more around the time of Banda Singh Bahadur. Um, and just to you know, refresh your guys' memory, um, when was like Banda Singh Bahadur like living? Like when was his like kind of time? You know, because right now we're just past the Sepoy Rebellion of 1857. Um, so, Prab, do you remember like when Banda Singh Bahadur was like, you know, prominent? Like around what year? You don't have to give me an exact, but like around what time period?
I don't know.
So, do you remember? So let's go back in time. Sepoy Rebellion was what year?
17. Oh wait, 1868. I think so.
1857, right? That's, you know, that's the name of the rebellion, right? Sepoy Rebellion of 1857. So now, even going back further, when were the Anglo-Sikh Wars?
I don't know.
Anglo-Sikh Wars. Come on, you got to know these things. Like, you don't have to know all the dates, but you have to know at least the ones I'm telling you now. Do you remember?
1840.
Right, in the 1840s. So, like the late 1840s, like 1846 to 1849. That's when the Anglo-Sikh Wars were. When did Maharaja Ranjit Singh die?
1802.
Not even close. When did he die?
Oh,
It wasn't, you know, think about it. The 1840s were that time of chaos. So when did Ranjit Singh die?
right. 1840, 1830.
Yeah, right around there. 1839, actually. So, you know, I'm probably actually going to have to write this down over here because you guys don't remember any of it. So 1857 was Sepoy Rebellion. You have like 1846 to 49 Anglo-Sikh Wars. 1839, Maharaja Ranjit Singh died. 1800, Maharaja Ranjit Singh comes to power. And now even before that, do you guys at all remember when did Guru Gobind Singh die, or when did Banda Singh Bahadur kind of come to power?
1680.
Close, getting there.
1700.
Yeah, around 1700. So 1708, Guru Gobind Singh Ji dies, and then from 1708, that should be, and then from there to 1708 to 1716 was Banda Singh Bahadur. All right, you guys got that? You got it?
Yes.
Alrighty, because I'm gonna erase that, and then I'm gonna have you guys fill out a little timeline on the homework now, because since you guys don't remember. So just these are the ones you guys should remember. You don't have to remember all the things, but these are the ones that you must remember. So, and this is all covered. So I do expect you guys to know. I'm a little disappointed actually. So I am going to put this on the homework assignment now. But yeah, so going back to what we were talking about, the British are going to be giving land to ex-soldiers, people who were in the army. And this is nothing new. Again, like we said, after Guru Gobind Singh dies, Banda Singh Bahadur takes over, like we talked about, like in the previous years. Um, and a lot of times, Banda Singh Bahadur's time was very short-lived. Like he was only really in power for like 7 years, and most of the time he was fighting the Mughals. So this thing actually gets overlooked. But one of his biggest things that he did um, was the redistribution of land. Um, this is probably one of the most important things about Banda Singh Bahadur, which gets overlooked. Um, but what the first thing he did when he got power was that he redistributed the land by taking it from like large like Hindu and Muslim like estates, like people who owned big plots of land didn't really do anything, and they gave it to more of like the peasantry, like little pieces. Okay, you get a little bit, you get a little bit, you get a little bit. It's like it's redistributed, like it's collected and kind of handed out again. And this is kind of probably the actual original roots of Punjabi farming, because this is kind of where a lot of more like the peasantry was given this land, and most of them did like farm on it and things like that. And this also paves way for things like the missiles to come about later on. Um, but this redistribution of land, especially to ex-soldiers, actually started around Banda Singh Bahadur, um, and this is continued by the British, and it's actually expanded even more. Um, and the reason for it is it's an incentive to join the army. It's like, hey, if I join the army for a couple of years and then I leave, I'm going to get some land, farmland. So I'll have a job in the army. And then after I'm done, I have land to live on, food on the land, and a constant income. Life is great. So that's why so many Sikhs join the army, because they're going to get land. Um, and at this time, recruitment is very heavy, and the number of Sikhs in the army is like increasing, by like a lot, very fast. This is one of the reasons, because they know that after they're done, they're gonna get land. And I don't know if you guys remember, but like a little over a month ago, Nimrith brought in a thing from one of her like great grandparents, which was actually like a little grant where he was given land for his service in the military. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Land given to ex-soldiers, which is, that's very, very important. So, and the reason it's important is because now you're going to have more soldiers in the army, and after they're done serving, they're going to farm. So they're constantly producing things for the British, and the soldiers themselves are constantly getting something. So it's like a very win-win situation. So another thing that's also happening is, since this agriculture is like booming, you want to support that agriculture with something else. And what you want to do, so if you have agriculture, like, you're producing a lot of raw resources, you want to be able to manufacture it. That'll develop the economy even more. It's famous in America, like the southern, states produce all the farming, all the cotton, all the things like that. And the northern place would, produce the factories. Same thing's kind of going on in India. You have farmland everywhere. And since this farming business is booming, a lot of like richer people, mainly Hindus and Muslims, and a little bit of Sikhs here and there, but mostly Hindus and also Muslims. They realized that the potential of this booming agriculture is, a lot. So they started to invest in things like industry. Industry is like factories and manufacturing. So if you have raw materials like cotton, okay, you're getting the cotton there, but what's next? You got to produce it into clothes. So that's what the factories do. If you're mining iron, you got to build tools and weapons, and other equipment. So that's what the manufacturing, that's what the industry is. So the number of factories is going to increase a lot. This is going more later on, but in 1900, you had about 150 factories in India. And by 1944, you had like almost 2,000, or in 1900, you had almost 1,200. So about 150 to 1,200 factories from 1900 to 1944. It's like, 1,000 factory increase in 45 years. It's a lot. And along with that, the labor force is also going to increase. You have factories, you need workers, you need laborers. So you had about 18,000 factory workers in 1900, but about 1.1 million in 1944. So the agriculture is booming, and along with it, this industry is also going to increase, with factories and labor force going to go up all the way up until Indian independence, which is 1947. So which I'm actually going to include over here. 1947 Indian independence. So I'll put that there too. Anyway, where were we? All right. So yeah, this industry is also booming here. And along with that, they have a lot of money going everywhere. You have a very developed economy here now. Well developed, meaning you have all parts of it. You have like agriculture, now you have industry. So in addition to support that, the Punjab National Bank was formed in 1895, followed by other like, insurance companies and other financial institutions. So there's a lot of financial maturity happening in India now. Like you have the agriculture, then industry, and now a national bank. Like you're getting a very well-developed economy here. So this like groundwork for like increasing industry and the national banks, this created by the Indian entrepreneurs, which are just like businessmen who kind of do things first. So they created a very well-developed economy in which the British are going to make the most money out of it. So the British are going to benefit the most out of this because, again, it's their colony. They're going to get the biggest share out of all the profits. Not that the Indians are not getting anything, they are, but just to reiterate, the British are getting the most. It's their colony. So, the important thing is here, you have a very well-developed, well-rounded economy. You have national banks, you have agriculture, industry. Everyone's, doing pretty well. And among all the people, it's the Sikhs that actually prospered the most. And this kind of stems from the Sepoy Rebellion because they established so much trust between them afterwards. So Sikhs right away got recruited for the army because they're favored to be in the army, and they're also favored to be farming. So they're like the roots of pretty much the Indian success after the rebellion. So the Sikhs end up prospering the most, and even like in the army itself, there's actually spots reserved for Sikhs only. So they want to, recruit as many from them as many from the martial races, as we talked about before, which the Sikhs are a part of. So you guys remember martial versus non-martial races? Probably remember what they were?
Marshals are like the people that the British like, and non-martial are like the people that the British hated.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's not really like hated. It was like marshals are the ones who they wanted to recruit in the army. People like Sikhs, people who are not so educated, but they're also really good farmers and soldiers. And non-marshals were like these money lenders, these like, rich bankers or people who just can't fight in the military. So the British favored the marshals for like, army and farming and stuff like that. But yeah, very good. I'm glad you remember that. So among all the Punjabi people, the Sikhs prosper the most. Makes sense. They're martial races. So, and another like effect of this is very important is that the prosperity of the Sikhs, which means their success, along with the British like preference for the Sikhs in the army. So the Sikhs are doing really well, and the British prefer them to do a lot of things. So this is actually a couple of things that actually are important factors in creating socioeconomic caste systems in the community. Now, what that means is socioeconomic, that's combining social and economic. So it's kind of saying like economic, like how, like socioeconomic caste system is like the division in the hierarchy of people depending on what kind of person and how rich you are. So it's like poor to rich, like if you're like a poor peasant, you're like in a low socioeconomic caste. And then if you're like really rich, high socioeconomic caste. We have that in America here too. We call it like white collar and blue collar. Like, white collar jobs are like, really good high paying jobs that require education, like engineers and lawyers and, businessmen, doctors and, managers, all those things. Then blue collar is like the lower socioeconomic caste. Not to saying they're lower class people. I'm just saying like the economic status. It's like, lower paying jobs. So like, cashiers and, laborers and construction workers, things like that. Not that they're, low class jobs. I'm just saying that like the economic status is lower. So that's like the caste system, even here. So this like prosperity, a lot in the Sikhs and the British preference for them, it's one of the factors that actually, made more of like a socioeconomic caste system among the community in India. And a weird thing here is also, because of all that success, like um, Sikh, a lot of Sikh like religious traditions, like cultural traditions, are like kind of disintegrating and diminishing, as we talked about from the Anglo-Sikh Wars and on. But on the flip side, we also have an increase in Sikh population, which is kind of weird. Um, but this is really because of, they're getting recruited for the army and they're getting land, so there's an incentive. So that's why Sikh population is going up, because they have an incentive to go up. There's a good reason for it. Like, it pays to be a Sikh at this time, like literally. So, but at the same time, a lot of Sikh traditional cultures, along with other religions too, like Hindu, Muslims, they find their cultures are also kind of dying out a bit, and they're like kind of getting mixing with everything. And this is the how the late 1800s are characterized, because this is going to pave the way for the social and religious reforms in the late 1800s. um, and the important thing here to know is that there's a lot of division among the people. This is the big thing I want you to get out of today, is that by now there's a lot of division between the people. Because think about it, first you have Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims, okay? And between there, the British prefer them for different things. So they're already separating them into jobs that they want them to do. Now, after the Sepoy Rebellion, the Hindus are in a weird place, because a lot of the Hindus were the ones who rebelled. So, a lot of like the Bengalis and, the people who rebelled are kind of, thrown out, And then you also have the Sikhs, who are being preferred for everything. And then within the Sikhs, you actually have a lot of division in the Sikhs too. Um, because like I talked about over here, most of the Sikhs in the army and a lot of the people who like are really like solid farmers, they're of the Jat community in the Sikhs. The Jat community of the Sikhs kind of starts back for the missiles, because they're the ones who really were like the most powerful missiles. They were the ones who were high in power with Maharaja Ranjit Singh during the Sikh Empire. Um, so you have the Jat, who are actually farming and also in the army. So they're like favored as like the highest caste of Sikhs. And then you also have other caste of Sikhs in there. Middle class Sikhs, also this the class of Sikhs that actually the Gurus came from, because the Gurus didn't come from the Jat. They came from a couple other ones. It says in the book, but it doesn't remember. I don't really remember what it said. But again, the important thing is you have Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims. You also have the martial and non-martials. Um, Now you have division within the Sikh community, like Jats and non-Jats and other people. You have like lower class laborers. There's a caste system within the religions, and this is also true for Hindus and Muslims. There's caste between them too. So you have Sikhs, Hindu, Muslims. You have their own caste in between them. Then you have martials and non-martials, and then you have the British in there, who are trying to separate them. Like we also talked about here, they separated the farmers. That adds to more of the division here. And then with that, each group of people has like a different socioeconomic status. And along with all those confusing times where now you have an alien power, alien meaning foreign. So you have a British power. There's just so much stuff going on. There's so much separation of people that um, all this like confusion is leading to a lot of, and especially in the Sikh community when there's no leaders, there is a lot of confusion and a lot of diminishing of social like aspects of life, and also in religion. And this PDF reading, I don't know if I had you guys read this or not, but the important thing was it said something's really good. um, yeah, you guys did read this. So it said, in the first phase, power produced wealth, and then wealth produced irreligiousness. So it's pretty much saying, Sikhs were in power, um, and then they lost power. Then they went from, you know, being poor after Anglo-Sikh Wars to now really rich. Like all these changes resulted in a lot of these religious traditions being thrown under the rug. And we also talked about how after the Anglo-Sikh Wars, a lot of Sikh and Hindu practices started to get mixed. So, um, this is going to pave the way. This division among the people is pretty much going to, and also the alien power, the British, um, is going to pave the way for the religious reforms that really characterize the late 1800s. Like this is the biggest part of Indian history in the late 1800s, is these religious reforms. Um, yeah. Oh, another important thing, probably should have put this up there, but there are so many Sikhs in the army, like we talked about. like between the Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims, actually, um, the Sikhs are the minority, meaning they have the least amount of people. So if you have Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims, the ones in the smallest amount of the Sikhs, they only make about 12% of the population in Punjab over there. So think about it. There's three like religions, like Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh. 12% are Sikhs, so it's a very small minority. Um, but they make up 25% of the army. Now these numbers are very different depending on what you read. I mean, what time period they're talking about, but pretty much, like, some estimates even say they're like a third or 50% of the army, and they're like 2% of the population. That could be of entire India, but and depending on what you read, these numbers are going to be different. But the one thing that's the same with all of them, the Sikhs are a very, very, very small minority. Like they make up such a small part of the population of India and Punjab, but they make up the biggest chunk of the army for the British. So that's important because the British are, they prefer them for the army. So that's another very, very important thing. Um, so yeah, um, we're not gonna have time to cover all this. This gets into the social and religious reforms. So I'm guessing we're gonna get into this next week. But what this kind of gets into is more the social and religious reform aspect of the late 1800s. So this right here, we cover a lot of the economic things that happened, the farming, the military, and most importantly, the division among the people. And even in the books, like, like I don't even mention all of them. It's not even necessary to know all of that, but like it even tells you all the different castes that were here. And this even says this is not complete. There's a whole other book you can read about the caste system in India at this time. So important thing is there's a lot of division among the people. And in addition, you have the British as the aliens over there who are also, making more division. Like they're separating people, they're favoring people. People have different socioeconomic statuses. It's like division after division after division. So, and among the people. So this is going to pave the way for the social reforms that happen, which we're going to be talking about in the coming weeks. So, yeah. Any questions, guys? No? All right. But another thing I wanted to mention, the thing about like I said about like the birth of like modern farming and like going back to giving land to ex-soldiers and Banda Singh Bahadur, that's still kind of what's going on today. Like that's kind of these are like the roots of what's happening today, just so you guys know. Which is another very important thing. And we saw a piece of real history like a month ago with Nimrit's that piece of paper she got, that grant of land for one of her ancestors. So again, that's real history and it's still happening today. So a lot of things you see here are happening today. So it's very, very important. But yeah, so there will be a homework assignment this week. There's going to be questions. Now, it's not going to be all of these because we didn't cover everything. But one thing I am going to add is this timeline here. So, because kind of disappointed you guys don't remember. Like, these are the ones you guys got to remember, these dates. So, I expect you guys to know this, and I'm going to put it on the homework assignment. So, it's not hard. It really isn't. Just like what, like handful of like years on there. It's not hard. But yeah, these things you should know. Like, don't tell me you guys don't know this. When was Guru Nanak born? Yeah, 1469. So that one you guys are okay, better know. Now you don't need to know when every single guru lived, but you should at least know first and last. So you have that like, block of time, 1469 from the birth of Guru Nanak to 1708 to the death of Guru Gobind. Like that you should know. Like I don't even know that in the middle. Of course I know what happened and stuff, but I don't know the years of any of it. It's not important. I mean it's important, but you don't need to remember it. You just remember these like key checkpoints. So yeah. So before we go, are there any last questions? No? Alrighty. And one thing that I gotta say though, you guys have been very consistent with submitting your homework, so keep up the good work. Like how you guys are submitting it, before class every time. So that's awesome. Keep up the good work. And these homework questions this week, there is quite a bit of them, but a lot of them are like one-word answers. Like for example, which group of people prosper the most? Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims. This is a one-word answer. Sikhs, Hindus, or Muslims. Or between Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims, who's the least in population will make up the biggest chunk of the army. That's another one-word answer. So, some of these are more like answer, like bigger answers, but like describe the effects of increased number of canals. Like just give me like a little explanation of what happened from the canals and stuff like that, like why they're important, stuff like that. Here, what are these three groups? How did land each receive? It's listing. How successful was the price of land? Again, that's more explanation. This is not an important question. But yeah, I'll skip these things. And then number 52 will be the timeline, which I'll draw on here. So you have these questions. I know it's got a lot, but I promise it's not. Use the notes, use the book. And yeah, I'll send this out as usual. So, but yeah. So if there's no questions, then you guys are free to go. Oh yeah, and be sure to like and subscribe and turn on that notification bell. Yeah. Are you subscribed? Huh? Look at the. Are you subscribed?
No.
Hey, get over here. Get.